Now, there was a story in this week's Observer about a match that was pulled at the last minute from the October 27th episode of Rampage. And it was scheduled to be Metalik against Komander. Now, Meltzer says the reason the show ended up only having 3 matches that week instead of the usual 4 is because Metalik refused to put Komander over. Now, Metalik still worked Collision a few days later, but that could not have helped his standing with the company. And there are people who might be able to get away with that sort of thing. Metalik would not be one of them. Now, he had just lost to Komander in a match that they taped for the Ring of Honor TV episode that aired a week earlier. So it's possible that maybe that had something to do with it. For his part, Metalik went on social media and he addressed the report. This is the English translation of what he said. "I've never refused to lose to anybody, and I have worked with the biggest companies for a reason. I've worked hard for my career. I respect Komander. Things didn't happen as they said." So that's his side of the story. Maybe he didn't like the way that he was supposed to lose. Maybe he's looking for a full-time contract with them and he doesn't want to just be doing jobs unless they give him some kind of deal. Right? There could be any number of reasons for this, but the match was pulled. So something happened, and it wasn't an injury. Something happened. And then I came across a very long Twitter thread from Rob Viper. Now, if you don't know who Rob Viper is, his real name is Rob Bahari. He's a longtime wrestling fan out of Toronto. He took a shot many years ago, probably 20 years ago now, at becoming a wrestler. Didn't pan out for him, but he fell in love with Lucha Libre. And later on, through his time working for High Spots, he ended up becoming a pretty well-known name in wrestling circles in Mexico. He was instrumental many years ago in getting PWG to start booking lucha talent. A lot of the Mexican talents even come to him for business advice sometimes. All that is to say that he's a pretty well-connected guy when it comes to Lucha Libre. I don't want all of you to think that I'm reading a thread here from some rando on Twitter. It could help shed some light into what may have happened with Metalik and how it sounds like Metalik has changed since his time in WWE. And not for the better. So for some background, Metalik spent over a decade working for CMLL before WWE brought him in for the Cruiserweight Classic. That was in 2016. And they brought him in at the recommendation of Finn Balor. He lost to TJ Perkins in the finals, and WWE signed him to a deal, right? They did the Lucha House Party stuff, and he was never, ever featured in what I would consider to be any real prominent way. So in July, he returned to CMLL for the first time in 6 years. 2 weeks later, he posted that he would no longer be working with CMLL, that they were not able to reach a deal. Then in August, Metalik did an interview, and Rob had a lot to say about it. And it's a long thread, but I think it's worth sharing here. This was from August. Big thing that is very clear is Metalik expected to return to Mexico as a bigger deal than he was received. This was a blow to his ego. He returned on a show that was honoring Atlantis, had 2 title matches, a tournament final, and a double hair match. His return was inconsequential. He can definitely blame CMLL for that, but the reality is nobody viewed him as a big deal. I know people who attend Arena Mexico weekly. They said the current fan base of tourists and regulars just don't know him. You have to remember Metalik was never a top guy. He was never a candidate to main event an anniversary. He was a cog in the CMLL wheel. One that we loved. Don't get me wrong. Prime Metalik was must-see every week, but in terms of star power, he was not one. The other thing about Metalik is he never had much charisma. That was one major worry about him going to WWE. He got over doing spectacular things. Once they stripped away the spectacular things, you had an unspectacular guy with no charisma. They broke him, as expected. The second big takeaway is how he was fine with a new Mascara Dorada, which is his name. He says his real issue is how he clearly felt upstaged by Dorada 2.0 in his return match. He takes many shots at him in the interview, and even before this all came out, I had heard similar things from folks in CMLL. One person noted to me, the guy nicknamed Rey de las Cuerdas is trying to tell me to stop doing rope tricks. Two ways of looking at this are WWE broke him so bad that he actually believes working slow is the better way. I am told this is 100% true. He feels this way now. The other way is the wrestler way. Metalik wanted the CMLL wrestlers to work slower, cut out rope tricks, limit how much they do per match so that he could shine without having to work harder to keep up. I watched every CMLL match of his. I know my opinion. You decide yourself. My third takeaway is why I feel CMLL cut bait immediately after that first run. He plays dumb in the interview, but he also casually mentions making in 3 matches what he makes for 1 US match. That's still a lot of money by CMLL standards. If you combine both the non-reaction to his return as well as his work during those 2 weeks, it seems like CMLL quickly realized this guy was not worth the money. CMLL has tons of depth now. They could get the same or more out of 20 plus guys in his spot for half the price. No brainer. It also probably didn't help his case that he rubbed a few people the wrong way with his better than you attitude, lecturing wrestlers on how to work. Especially when one of those guys is the one that CMLL has currently chosen to get behind as their big young star. The entire interview was absolutely wild to me because this Metalik is not at all the same person he used to be. I don't claim to know the man well personally at all, but in all my interactions with him pre-2023, he was very humble, quiet, and appreciative. I heard stories of friends of his trying to get him to badmouth CMLL in private, and he wouldn't even do that. Every response was always, thanks to God and CMLL, I am where I am today. Not a cross word. His life goal was to return to CMLL as the conquering hero post-WWE. So to now see a public interview where he takes shots at CMLL and wrestlers who were at the stage of their own career where he once was, it is both shocking and sad. It may be reflective of the company he's keeping these days on the indies. He's being steered in a certain direction. Even in his WWE days, he was always known as the follower. Whatever his partners told him to do, he did. Even when it came time to leave. The last thing Metalik should have done, while waiting for papers, was leave. But he followed, even though it put him in limbo for 18 months. During those 18 months, where he was barely working, I heard many instances where he turned down work as to not be on events with AAA wrestlers. That's how loyal he was to CMLL. Imagine turning down work so as not to anger a company that doesn't even employ you. Personally, I thought he was being dumb, but I at least understood his mindset. His end goal was an Arena Mexico return. He didn't want to jeopardize that. Sure enough, he eventually had to cave because he was stuck in the US and he needed to work. So he took the matches with Daga and Taurus. Then we had the GCW incident, which is not my story to tell, so I won't. It was unprofessionalism at its finest. In one sense, I kind of want someone to tell the story, since he'll never work there again. Not to shame him, but teach a lesson to others on how not to conduct yourself. I am big time not a fan of when wrestlers play dumb in public, knowing full well their actions have consequences. For example, Andrade saying that he can't understand why he was blocked from Forbidden Door. Metalik is booked with Lucha House Party in Chicago on the 24th with AAA talent. You can't do a 30-minute interview claiming you don't know why CMLL might be angry with you without mentioning that. Cut that shit out. The other two may be able to get away with it because they are foreigners. You are a Mexican. Homegrown CMLL. You know the rules. Stop playing ignorant. I don't know what the future holds for the guy. He manages to have weak matches with both Gringo Loco and Vikingo. How is that even possible? I've been less than impressed with all of his AEW work, but he keeps returning, so clearly Tony Khan likes him. That's all that matters right now. Long term, I worry for him after this interview. The AEW dates may run out at some point. He's not returning to New Japan now that he's on CMLL's shit list. WWE is not going to come calling. AAA can't offer regular work, nor will their work pay the bills. He's really limiting himself. Mascara Dorada is in my top 5 favorite wrestlers ever. Always wanted to work with him one day too, but it wasn't meant to be. I also don't live in the past. I have very little time for the Metalik of today, either inside or outside the ring. I wish him well. Just sad how it's turned out. One other thing, Metalik did not attempt to learn the most basic English in his 5 years working for WWE. I believe non-English speakers can succeed in American pro wrestling, but WWE is its own animal. If you sign up for it, you play under their rules. English is required. You are far more likely to succeed if you learn the language. No luchador who has ever worked in WWE would disagree with that statement. The fact Metalik went his entire run thinking that rule did not apply to him, even with a family having migrated to the US, says a lot. None of it good. So that's a lot to take in about Metalik. Then on Friday, after Meltzer shared that story in The Observer about him not wanting to lose to Komander, Rob took to Twitter again with another much shorter thread, I promise, about Metalik. This is what he said. There are two types of people who get released from WWE after spending years doing nothing. Number one, those who have something to prove either to themselves or their former company. Number two, those who believe they made it to the big show and anything/anyone else is beneath them now. I think it's fairly obvious Metalik should be in category number one, but he has very clearly positioned himself in category number two. And again, it goes directly to the company that he keeps, the ones in his ear. Metalik is a born follower, and unfortunately he's following the wrong people now. Hopefully someone can get through to him and have the talk. Explain how his 4 years in WWE meant nothing outside of his bank account. He's not even 2017 Metalik any longer. He's pre-New Japan Metalik. He's got to build his name up once again and find what made him special in the ring. If the latest story out there is true, Tony absolutely cannot have him back in that locker room without losing face with all of the Mexican talent. It cannot be acceptable for someone in Metalik's level to be dictating wins and losses. If he gets away with it, it's open season for the rest. I believe the story to be true because it continues Metalik's established pattern. 2 stories are out publicly now, but there have been 3 incidents where he has refused to be a professional. It's sad. There was a time where this was the last guy in the world that you would expect this from. So with the benefit of all of this context, it does not paint Metalik in a good light at all. And if he's pulling this crap now with AEW, there's no way he's going to keep getting opportunities because really, who is Metalik to tell Tony Khan, that don't work for me, brother? He better be careful before he burns one bridge too many.